Welcome to the TriStar Podcast, where martial arts meets family, faith, and personal growth. Join Professor Brummett and Professor Chris Bean as they share stories from the mat, lessons from life, and tools to help you and your family live like black belts on and off the mat. It's time to train the body, sharpen the mind, and strengthen the spirit right here on the TriStar Podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome back. Today we're going to be tackling something that everybody wants, but few people actually understand, and that's confidence. Everyone says they want more of it. Parents want their kids to have it. Adults, we want to feel it. Schools try to teach it, but most people, they're chasing the wrong thing, because confidence doesn't come from words. It comes from the work.
Yeah, amen to that. It definitely
Yes.
does.
So, and I guess really that's kind of the lie that we're taught, that the world teaches us confidence kind of like believe in yourself, you're amazing, you can do anything. And those statements aren't necessarily evil, but they're also not fully complete, because
They're also
belief
not, there's not also not very helpful, to be quite honest with you.
they're not, and maybe those are key things that you have to have in line. Like those are affirmations you can tell yourself that will lead you to be confident, but that's not the be all end all. There's more to that puzzle. Because I think belief without the skills creates a fragile confidence. Yeah, you can feel like you're confident for all intents and purposes. You can look confident, but when the pressure hits, you're going to see that you're not very stable in that confidence that you have. That's going to be the kind that's going to shatter under that pressure. I think that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, you do have to believe in yourself to a certain degree. So you do obviously um, have to. Well, let's just put it this way: we all have a belief in ourselves, whether it's yes, I can, maybe I can, no, I can't, or there is absolutely no way that I can. I mean, so there is levels, I think, to that belief, but just saying I believe I can do something, it's kind of like, and I always bring Zig Ziglar up. Zig Ziglar always said that motivation's not permanent, but neither is bathing. So just because, you clean yourself once, yeah, I believe, doesn't mean that you can actually achieve it. You have to do the work. There are things that have to be done and completed in order to actually prove that belief. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. So like otherwise it's like it could be thought of like you're wearing a costume, because you don't actually trust yourself because you've never proven yourself. That's not confidence. Again, that's kind of where in the confidence. That's where it comes to you have to do it every day, day in and day out. You have to prove to yourself that you are the confident type of person.
Agreed.
And
And go ahead.
well, I was just say I think that kind of the formula that we're going to kind of talk about here today is real confidence is built on competence, not feelings, not hype, not praise. And by competence we means basically that you've practiced and you've failed, you've adjusted, and you tried again. You've seen yourself go through the improvement. Confidence is just your brain remembering that I've handled things like this before. That competence is you having the ground to stand on and said, yeah, you know what? I've done hard things before and I can continue to do hard things.
Agreed. Yeah. And there's a false, like to your point, there's a false sense of confidence when you have not created that competency in what it is that you're trying to have confidence in. Yeah, no, I totally agree.
Right, and that's where sometimes people fall into the imposter syndrome a little bit. Could be this, but also that we start wearing confidence like a costume, and maybe that is the first thing you should do, because you need to pretend to do it. You need to fake it until you make it, and part of that is going through the reps and having a database sort of to think about all of the things that you've done that led you to this point. And sometimes it's worth reflecting on those things. Sometimes if you have a tough day or a downtime, it's worth going back and looking through a kind of catalog of yourself, of the achievements that you have, to help to remind you where you are in the ground that you're standing on. And sometimes having a success list that you keep to yourself when you go to on a down day is super helpful, and can be that competence boost that you need to remind yourself that you are confident and that you can go through this as you've went through all of those other things in the past.
And without that catalog, because that's what your mind does, is it searches for how did you solve this in the past, or how does this relate to something that, I have a problem with right now. And that's why it's so important. And, maybe we're going to talk about this, but that's why it's so important. And you had brought it up already, failure. Um, it's important to learn how to fail so that then you have those skills for later on. It's like even uh, I tell my health clients that, if going from point A to point B was a straight line. So you let's say you need to lose 50 pounds. You lost 50 pounds in a straight line, no problems. You had no hiccups, nothing. There was not one thing that was an obstacle for you to overcome. The problem is now once you get to that healthy weight that you wanted to be at, you have not created the skills to actually maintain that weight at all because you haven't gone through the tough things. When somebody at work says to you, "Hey, would you like a piece of the cake because it's Jane's birthday?" Like you haven't developed those skills, and so that ability to go through those obstacles are truly important to have real confidence, not a fake belief.
Well, and I think so. So okay, we can stay on failure here for a couple minutes because I think failure really is the shortcut here. And not that everything needs a shortcut, everything deserves a shortcut, but I think failure can be your stepping stone for this. Failure is uncomfortable, but
Hmm.
what it really is failure is the fastest way to achieve that competence. Because when you fail and you survive, your nervous system gets to learn something. You get to learn that, hey, listen, that wasn't fatal. That right there, that is what confidence is. Kids who grow up and who the kids who grow up and who are terrified of making mistakes, they're going to be terrified to step out of their comfort zone. They're going to be terrified to try new things. They're not going to be able to, they're going to crumble. They're not going to have that confidence that we want them to have. But kids who are allowed to fail in a proper environment, to fail safely, they're going to be able to grow up and be resilient. And I think martial arts and what we've done with the martial arts too, I think really helps with this because martial arts helps that controlled failure. We've talked about that in the past, where with Alexis, where we had that opportunity for her to go through that orange belt, and she didn't quite make it. She wasn't right on the information for herself, but she did that in a controlled way around people that cared about her, and we cared about her enough to hold her to that standard, the standard that we knew
Yes.
that she could reach for herself, and we allowed that carrot to be placed in front of her for her to be able to reach for and not just give it to her instead.
So important. Yeah. In fact, it's funny that you bring her up because she reached out today to have me write a letter of recommendation for her. So I went back and I pulled up her first degree and second degree essay, and I looked. It was actually orange belt with a white stripe. She was orange and she was going for orange belt with a white stripe. So that was kind of funny that you brought that up today.
And so I think that failure, especially as it relates to martial arts, and I touched on this last time too. Not that we can do this, and I don't think this would be right to do, but I think it does something to you when you are on that path, especially in the martial arts, in the classes. If you miss a stripe, or if you miss a technique, you lose that sparring match. You forget a form. You don't get whatever that thing is correct. You realize I'm still okay. And that right there is
Yes.
emotional strength. And I'm reminded of Chuck Norris. And Chuck Norris is kind of close to us in our art because he started doing Tang Soo Do, and that's the base art that we do. And
Right.
I'm reminded of the story about him at his black belt test. And I'm gonna kind of paraphrase this a little bit and also kind of storylize this a little bit as well. So it's going to be a little bit different probably than what actually happened. But the way that I remember this was he went to his black belt test, and of course he was the outsider that was there because he did this while he was training overseas, and so he was the um, he didn't fit in with everybody else in that kind of way, and so they treated him as an outsider in that way as well. So when he went to his black belt test, and they did this, they were outside, it was cold, there was snow on the ground. In my mind, it was up on a mountain, although I probably wasn't on a mountain, but in my mind, that's how I picture it. He sat there for hours and hours and hours waiting for him to have his turn to go and do something. And listen, everybody there already discounted him. They already thought of him as less just because he wasn't like everybody else. And so he sat there and waited and waited and waited. Then he called him up to do Basai, which is a form that we do at black belt level. And he froze. He forgot it. He couldn't do it. Ah, okay, sit back down. He sat back down for the whole rest of the time, which black belt tests are hours and hours long, and I can only
Right.
imagine how long it was there and how emotionally that felt to sit out there in the cold, in the snow. Wow. And that's Chuck Norris. I mean, if you don't know who Chuck Norris is, I would encourage you to do some research about Chuck Norris because
You're living under a rock or what?
yes, big time martial arts. Anyway, so he failed his black belt test. And the interesting thing about that is when we think of Chuck Norris now, we don't think of somebody who is not confident. We don't think of him as
Right.
somebody that lacks competence or skill or dedication or any of those things. But I think that, and I'm putting this on him because I have never interviewed him, although that would be interesting to do. Um,
That would be
I think that
awesome.
I think that that probably stuck with him. I don't think that that was something that he forgot about the next day or the next week or the next year, maybe even now, however many years ago that was. I'm sure that played a very significant role for him and his trajectory from then on because he waited and waited and waited for him to do that one thing. He went out there and did one thing. Nope, you're done. Sit down. And they didn't let him do anything else. And so that to me allows that failure as a shortcut to competence and confidence as long as it's done correctly. And I think in the martial arts, the way that we have designed the school, failure does happen because we have standards. And if you are not able to make that standard, it's okay. We come alongside you. We
Right.
talk about what happened. We talk about what we can do as those next steps. And then we allow those next steps to happen and give you another shot to do it. It's not like you're done forever, but that can really supercharge the confidence for yourself because it gives you that one more thing to stand on that will help to propel you forward.
Yeah, and then it's just, I mean, it's real confidence. I know, and some people may know Steven Seagal, but he every black belt that's every person that's testing for their first degree black belt fails their first degree black belt test the first time around. Everybody does. 100% of the people that test for first degree black belt fail their very first time. And he does that specifically to see how you're going to handle it. Are you going to come back? And they may fail a second time. I have no idea. But I got that from our friend Allie, who's trained with him before. And it's interesting how he does that because he really puts you to the test.
Hmm. Well, and okay, so the other cool thing about martial arts is martial arts kind of accidentally solves the confidence problem because you don't get confidence first. The first, if you can remember back to the time when you first step onto the mats, you were awkward. You did, if you think back to like that white belt class, those first couple classes you did in comparison to what you're doing now at whatever level you're at, it is much different material. It's much less material. Not to diminish white belt because that's a step that everybody has to take, but you have to go through that awkward stage. You have to go through those kind of tiring, sometimes frustrating, sometimes exhausting first couple of classes because you're learning to move your body in a way that you're not normal, that's not normal to you, right? You learn to bring yourself to a sense of being humble. And then you realize that you can do things that you didn't think that you could do before. And that's the martial arts philosophy. I can always do better than I think I can do. Right? And
Yes.
once you start to understand that, then your posture changes, your voice changes, your eye contact changes. Not because somebody told you to feel more confident, but because you went through the steps. You have built that little ball of competence that you can stand on. And then as you go, as you continue through the martial arts, the more and more competent that you get and the more confident that you get as well.
Yeah, agreed. And really, you've heard me talk about him before, but Dan Sullivan, he's an entrepreneurial coach, but he teaches a formula. He calls it the 4C formula, and it's commitment, courage, capability, and confidence. But notice confidence comes last. So in what he's talking about, you make a clear choice on what it is that you want to achieve. So you make that commitment that you're going to, maybe you don't have the ability yet, but you make a commitment that you're going to do it. And then you take the step forward, which is the action that we've talked about. And that's courage. Now you're being courageous. You're moving one step at a time and failing and, or navigating again and readjusting. And so you have that courage to continue. And then by doing that, by having that commitment and having that courage, what that does is it creates that capability, which once you create that capability or that competency that you're talking about, now you have confidence. And
Mm.
it's the confidence is based in one, reality, but two, in history, meaning historical things that you've had to go through in order to create that capability that now gives you the confidence in that. Does that make sense?
It does. And I'm going to kind of tee you up for this and set you up for this, and hopefully I can do it well enough that you remember what I'm talking about. But I remember there was a time, and I don't know if you still do this from time to time or if you even still have this, but there was a binder that you had where
Mm.
you collected all of those. You know what I'm talking about? Can you
Yeah,
talk about that?
yeah, I have it. It's actually in this cabinet right here. Yes. Yeah. So it's funny that you bring it up. So I have a binder, and you can see how thick it is, right? I have a binder that I had students, or I didn't have students. For Christmas one time. I think this is how it came out to be. Yeah, because this is a Christmas thing. So um, parents and students together wrote down just how and the impact that we made in their lives. What TriStar Martial Arts meant to them, what they've seen their kids, how they've seen their kids grow. Gosh, some of these names from the past, man. And now that I'm opening it back up, it's been a little while since I've opened it back up, but I don't know if you're going this way with this, but it often was a time when I felt down and I felt like I wasn't making a difference. I'd open this binder up, and this binder has got to be, well, what is this? We're moving into almost 29 years. So this probably is at least 20, 25, 26, but more like 26 or 27 years old.
Wow. Well, and exactly that, right? Because that is your stand. That's what you can stand on. Not that you're going to take it out and stand on it, but that if you have a tough day, you can
I
go back
could.
and look at you could take it out and
I
look at
did.
those past successes, and that can help to inform and refresh your competence and confidence as you move forward. And moreover than that, with this specifically, that can even be your motivation as you move forward. So I say all this, and I wanted to bring that up because well, I talked about having a catalog of successes, of past successes, and I think that that is something that it doesn't matter where you are in life, you can have a area in your notebook, a spot on your phone where it has all of the successes that you've accomplished in your life so far. And each time you have another one, you add to it. If you're having a tough day, a particularly tough day, then you go and you look at those things and oh yeah, remember this and then that can motivate you, but it can also give you that courage and confidence to step out and do whatever that next thing is. And oftentimes that down moment is sparked from a failure. Something didn't go the way that you wanted to. And we know, we literally just talked about it, that failure can be that spark, that shortcut to get you that next level of confidence because that is the competence. That is your past that brings you in. It gives you a shoulders to stand on. It gives you something to move forward on. It is the history of you that says, hey, listen, I've done all of these things already. I've done this and this and this. These things were really, really challenging. And that's wow, that one almost wiped me out. I almost didn't make it out of that one. But I did. And because I did, I know that I can move on to this next thing. I can be confident as I move into that new direction.
Absolutely. And we build that in. I mean, okay, so you kind of brought this up. Martial arts has this by default. So one of the ways that it's already built in is, white belt going for their yellow belt. They go, wow, I just earned a yellow belt. Now I have a little bit of confidence to now move to, I earned my yellow belt. So now maybe I can earn my yellow with white. Now I earn my yellow with white. Oh, now maybe so we're building like if you look at it from an outward standpoint, that's one of the levels of building that confidence or competency, where they're moving up, and then they have the capability to do everything at that belt level. So now they can look back and go, okay, well, yeah, I was able to learn a front kick and a round kick. Why wouldn't I be able to learn an axe kick and a side kick? Like, you know what I'm saying? They're not saying that in their head, but they are subconsciously searching, because that's what happens. Your brain searches for past experiences and how you're going to handle the present experience. So we're already creating that.
Right. And I want to be very clear on this. Don't read too far into this, because I'm going to be very just dogmatic and say this. We're not saying that you should live in the past. Don't be
Right.
somebody who who continues to live in the past. Live in the present and maybe even a little bit of the future, but allow that past to be you. You went through all of those things. You went through all of the trial and tribulations to lead you to where you are right now. Allow that to inform and encourage you and give you courage in order to stand and move forward onto the next thing. And if you face a challenge, a particularly tough challenge, or you fail at whatever that thing is, that's okay, because you know that you've been through all of those challenges and failures in the past. Everybody has. We have to go through those things. Then we can move into that next thing. We can reface that challenge with new courage, new motivation, and we can hopefully come out of that as a success. If not, then maybe we can learn something from that failure that we are facing then.
Totally agree. And then when you do decide to make that commitment and have the courage to go, let's just say, to the next belt level, then you're going to create another set of capabilities, which just gives you more confidence.
Absolutely. Now, I think it's also worth noting too that there is a sort of real confidence, but there's also a fake confidence. And I think that fake confidence, if we can kind of give it some ideas, or like how would we spot a fake confidence? I think fake confidence would be loud, it would be defensive,
Yes.
it would need attention. It would be the type of confidence that would crumble under any sort of feedback. They would avoid hard situations. Can you think of any other things that would be like identifiers for fake confidence?
No, I think you hit on those really, really well. When you said loud, and I was thinking loud and obnoxious, and
Yeah.
obviously defensive,
Mm.
where, we can't take constructive criticism or criticism in general. Yeah, no, I think that's true. I think that definitely is fake confidence.
Right.
Um,
And I think that kind of the signal there is it's something that doesn't want to be questioned, because if it's called in the question, then it's like, okay, well, I have to have an account for this, and I don't really have an account for this. This is just all fake. So just don't question me. I'm going to be real loud. I'm just going to be real showy. I'm going to be, just be real quick. I'm not going to hang around and talk afterwards. I'm out by. I'm seeing like those are the type of things that to me reads, okay, that guy's or that gal is not. They're not really that confident. This is a show.
well, even when we were molding, or when I was molding our curriculum together, I if you can remember this, let me tee this up for you and see if you answer it the way that I'm trying to describe it. One thing that I always asked you to, not just you, but the students in general, to do is, it's okay for you to ask what?
Um, I don't know.
If we're doing a technique and you didn't you did the technique, but you didn't understand the reasoning behind it, what did I not mind you asking?
Oh, why? Why are we doing
And,
this?
and yeah, and I'm not saying that I have a lot of confidence. That's not what I'm saying. But I wanted you guys to have the space to be able to ask why. And then I don't know if you ever remember me saying this, but if I couldn't give you a reasonable answer, then we probably shouldn't what?
And we shouldn't do it anymore. And you know, I have remembered times, and I might remember these maybe differently than you do, and I might be, um, and I'm sure it happened other times, but I can remember a few times that I've asked questions and had counterpoints that kind of follow up that question, and then we've changed, particularly a handful of self-defense moves, based on those things to improve them, to make them actually, real world applicable as opposed to classroom applicable.
Yes, absolutely. But see, that's where, and I think that was like me trying to draw a correlation to, you know, the confidence that we're talking
Mhm.
about in the martial arts setting. That if something doesn't work, or maybe it works for me but it doesn't work for you, or the reverse opposite, just because we have height differences as well, you know so all that has to be taken in consideration. But um back to your main point, that if we are being loud, defensive, we need attention. What else did you say? You we um
Crumbles under feedback, avoid hard
yeah.
situations. Yeah.
Yeah, if we're feeling those type of things, then maybe we need to take a look at our confidence level in that
Mm.
area. Now, it doesn't mean that it bleeds over to other areas, because I am when I step out on the floor and teach, I'm very confident on what I am teaching. But when I go to like, we just did some remodeling in our house, and me having a hammer or even a drill or doing I'm not confident in those type of things. That is not a core competency of myself. And so I'm a lot more hesitant when I do those things. It's not fake confidence, because I know I don't have it. But if I were to act like it, then that would be a fake thing. But
Well, and
what
it's
I don't
interesting.
do, I'll just say real quickly, what I don't do is I don't let my lack of confidence in that area carry over to where I know that I'm good at. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, and I think that comes, and I think we talked about this before, is males generally are more like waffles where we can compartmentalize things, and then females are more like spaghetti where everything kind of worms or you know twirls
Touches.
together. There's a difference there, and I think that this is even something that holds true across male or female. And the other thing I think is interesting too is the being confident is, yes, we are confident when we're teaching the moves, but there's another layer to that because we are also confident in the moves that we are teaching. And I think that sometimes martial arts has a misnomer where there's a fake sort of confidence both in the person teaching it and in the moves that they're teaching. And partly that I think is historical based because sometimes the historical karate moves, the karate-e type moves, historically are very karate-y and they might have worked maybe in that time period. However, in the time period that we are now is much different. And so we needed to move past that ground level, surface level information and move into another steps, a few steps higher or to a different room or however you want to think about that. But we use that information to inform where we are now. We use that as the competence to inform the moves that we're doing. And we are also understanding that unless we put these things into like a full on, like, okay, go to this bad part of town and go fight these, like it's maybe not that, it's a, whatever. But as it relates to the moves that we're doing, we are again we're confident in that in the how we're teaching and conveying the information, but we're also confident in the moves themselves that they will work as they are prescribed to work because they work. And I think I'm reminded of that when and I see you do this often, and because you're really good at this, you're teaching the moves, and sometimes you're teaching the moves to kids or even sometimes older kids, like teenager type areas, and you bring in a dad, and it's not particularly like a dad that's like my size, but a dad that's like big and tall and big, and you do this move to him, and it's like I know the move, I know how it's going to work, especially because I've seen it play out a handful of times. It's fun to watch. And the kids, when I see their faces light up, or even the teenagers, their faces light up, like, oh man, wow, that was like it looks so easy because it actually is so easy because these things just work, which is
Yeah.
is really interesting.
Well, and look, when it's real confidence, whether it's confident in a technique or whatever it is, when it's real confidence, you I guess some attributes are, there's this calmness, there's this groundedness, if you will. You're and people that are confident, you're open and to learn other things or different perspectives. Kind of like when you said, hey, I have an opposing point. You didn't say this when you were talking to me about it, but for the listeners, you said I had brought up an opposing point to a move or moves, and then we discussed it and went through it. If I wasn't open to that, I think that would have been a signal to you that, well, maybe a couple of things. One, that I wasn't confident, but also that was probably pretty well, I don't know, jerky or haughty or whatever. Like, so I got to be, if you want to be confident, I think you need to be open to learn. Um and will even willing to struggle.
And I think
That's
the
real
other thing is,
confidence.
well, I think another part of real confidence is if somebody asks you a question and you don't actually know the answer to that question, you have to be comfortable with saying, I don't actually know that answer. I've never been
Yeah.
asked that question before. What a wonderful question. I'm going to do some research and I'm going to do my best to find out what that answer is. And if I can't find it out, we're going to change this to make it better.
Yes. Agreed. Yep.
Yeah. And I think that the martial arts school is one of the few places left where that fake confidence kind of dies fast because as soon as people start asking questions, it's very easy to poke holes in those things, right? It's very easy for people to see that. And so I hope that as the students and parents they're coming to our school, they see the kids or even the parents sometimes asking the question, and the answer that we give is either, yeah, I don't know, that's a really good question, or it is the answer because it is the answer and it works. And then we can kind of explain or show or demonstrate why and how it works because it does work. And we're confident in those moves that we do because we've had those things happen again numerous times in the past, and we've changed and modified and just straight gotten rid of things and adopted new things because of this doesn't work. And sometimes it takes an outside person to ask that question because as we're doing it, I can modify it enough to make it work, or you can modify it enough to make it work, or because you're my partner and you know what the end result's supposed to be, you're going to
I go
allow it
with
to
it.
happen. You're going to go with it so that that thing actually happens. But sometimes we need that outside, like, hey, like push back on them a little bit, like give them a little bit to see how it goes, and we do that in class, especially as it gets higher up into the advanced class, the black belt class. We start to ask that question for the partners. Hey, push them back a little bit and see if And the other thing is too, because we're confident in the moves and in the way they work, as long as they're done the way that we're teaching them. So sometimes we'll have a student push back on another student who's not quite doing the move right, so that we can use that as a teaching tool to say, hey, listen, that right there is the thing that you were missing. So let's try this again, but this time do it this way, and let's see how that goes.
Yeah, it was funny because I was just teaching ONU's law enforcement class. We every year we do the defensive tactics for their law enforcement program, and uh, a dude, big guy. I mean, well, he's a kid. He's a guy, but he's a kid to me, right? So he's, I don't know, maybe he's 22 or something like that. But just, I mean, guy's massive. And I had just said, like, okay, I knew he was the strongest, but I said, all right, who's the strongest here? Who do you think? They all pointed at him, and I said, okay, come here. And we were doing the sea lock, which you know what I'm talking about.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I said, look, I go, everybody's going to want to do this. You're going to want to take your arm and you're going to be pressing into this position here, and you're going to think it's all muscle oriented. And I said, look, I go, here, I'm going to do this. Don't let me get the joint lock on you. And he's fighting me. He's fighting me. And then all I did was just take my elbow and I just dropped it. And as soon as I dropped it into position, because this is the framework that you need in order to execute the leverage of the technique, because it's not a muscle bound or muscle based technique. It's a leverage technique. And then you saw him drop, and everybody's like, "Oh my gosh!" And then he said, "Wow." He goes, "It's just that small little detail that made the huge difference." And the reason I bring that up is kind of what you were saying is we pressure test a student so that we can see where the leaks are, and then when we do that, we can show them that small little thing that needs to be changed that makes a huge difference in that technique.
Yeah, and again, the cool thing is not only then does that one person see, wow, this does work, but everybody else around sees, wow, this does work. And so that establishes credibility, and then they can be confident in the move because they can see how it's done and why it works and that it does actually work.
Yeah, definitely. But and you had brought this up in the beginning, failure though, is important in this whole process. And I wish sometimes we didn't call it failure. I mean, we grow up calling it failure. We almost need to reframe that in a way that it's a different thing that's happening. You didn't fail, you learned. And at some point you got to teach that. But anyways, um, failure really is the shortcut to success. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, we talked about this too, is martial arts has that controlled failure right in there. Like, again, if you miss a technique, if you're doing the technique and you can feel that it's not right, right? Because that in itself, it like is not a failure on an extreme scale, but it is a failure on a small scale. And sometimes that failure on a small scale, oh, nope, I didn't quite do that right. Let me stop and restart that. Let me do that again. And whether you're talking to your partner, or you're doing this in like an open mat type of situation, and you stop and restart, what the other thing that does is your brain learns, hey, that didn't feel right. Let me stop here. Let me do this again. And then your brain has an opportunity to learn from that failure. They can your brain allows your body to work through whatever that move is. You do it right, it feels right. Then you do it maybe once or twice more. Okay, great. Now I can move on to the next thing. And then maybe you touch on it again just to make sure, and then you can move on. So that failure doesn't necessarily have to be, oh man, I failed a belt test. Maybe it's I failed a stripe test. Maybe it's I didn't quite get this move right. Or maybe it was, wow, my teacher had to fix me on this today. All of those things in one definition, they are failures. But they're not necessarily a crumbling. It's not like a failed your black belt test, although sometimes that does happen. And the benefit that comes out of that, if it can be done correctly, if you allow us to come alongside you to teach you through, to work through this information, then it can be. But it could be even you don't win a sparring match, right? That could be a failure. And yes, you could think, okay, that's wow, man, that guy was tough. I'm so glad I'm done with that one, and you move on. But if you can think through what happened, how you can perhaps better defend or block or attack, insert whatever the situation is there for you. But if you don't look at those failures, then you don't have an opportunity to add those to your competence and then therefore build your confidence.
Yeah, and failure in most cases, right, is not fatal.
Mhm.
It's not
Yes.
fatal. And but sometimes some kids, and then obviously when they grow into be an adult, they look at every failure as something that's actually fatal, and that's not it at all. Failures have levels as well. Man, I I I failed at tying my shoe is not the same as I failed to yield to the right and I went through the stop sign and hit a car. Like those are two different levels of failure, right? But
Yes.
kids kids who are never afforded the opportunity to really fail, they're terrified
Hmm.
when they make mistakes. As opposed to kids who are, they I guess we could kind of call it they fail safely. Well, they become more resilient. Part of that, though, is our responsibility as parents that when our kids, one, we let them fail, but two, how we respond to that. So, for instance, I'm a kid, I spill milk at the kitchen table that we're eating dinner, and then was that a failure? Yes. But do I deserve to be screamed at over that? No. Now, there's a lot of variables that need to be taken in consideration there. You know, the parents or parent, because it could be a single family home, they worked all day. They paid a lot of. They're barely making ends meet. They paid a lot of money. Now the milk is spilled. Now it's wasted. Now there's a cleanup that has to happen. That's just one more. Like there's these stacks of emotions going up and up and up and up, and then you just blow up on your kid.
Yeah.
And I get it. I get it. But when we do those things, you do it once, you apologize, you try not to do it again. That's one thing. But if that's a repeated habit, kids then don't learn that they can fail safely. Even if they're learning how to fail, they're learning how to fail, but not fail safely, knowing that they're not going to get chewed out You kind of see where I'm going with that?
Yeah, well, and the other thing is, I think from a parenting standpoint, this is a real a game changer. I mean, game changer gets thrown around often, but I think really this one is because we and we've touched on this before, but we kind of live in a time period, a civilization, a time in history where telling kids that they're amazing is the quote unquote right thing to do. And it does feel good in the moment, but letting them earn pride feels better in the long term, right? Letting them fail and then coming alongside them. And I keep using that phrase, coming alongside them. I'm doing that on purpose because we don't want to step over them. We don't want to pull them along. We don't want to be behind them, pushing them. We want to be alongside them, especially as it relates to failure on something that they've done, because then we can look at it with them. And I think looking at whatever that failure is with them, yeah, maybe we're a step ahead of them in terms of the things that we've seen, the things we've done, and we can kind of give them some insight for that. Absolutely. But we have to come alongside them and let them to allow us both to look at that failure for whatever it is. What can we learn from this? How did this happen? What can we do so this doesn't happen next time? Right? Parents don't need to give the kids confidence. In fact, I don't know that a way that you can give your kid confidence that's real confidence and that's not that fake form of confidence that we talked about earlier. Right? I think they if you give kids the opportunity to struggle through things in a straight, safe, structured, supportive, and honest type of way, then confidence is kind of the thing that's going to happen kind of by default.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And Zig Ziglar always, I know I bring him up this is the second time I think in this podcast, but he said you can't tailor make what happens to you in life, but you can tailor make the responses in advance to what happens to you. And I'll use his example, good morning. So I always want to have a response when somebody says good morning to you, you know, or how are you? I'm doing outstanding, but I'm improving. Like that's my response back. No matter what is happening in my life, I'm doing outstanding, but I'm improving, or I'm doing super good, but I'm getting better. Or I will say good, and then and then I'll say, how are you? And they say good, and I say, well, that's good. Actually, I'm doing better than good. I just don't want to make you jealous. Like I have three of them that I pull from. And the reason I bring that up is I'm going to go back to the spilled milk thing. So you make a mistake, you yell at your kid over the spilled milk, and then you go, that's not how I want to handle, and you apologize. Then you decide, you know what, that's not how I want to handle that in the future. So when those things come up, and you're emotionally charged, you come up with a phrase that you're always going to say. And you could say, uh-oh, how do we want to handle this? It could be as simple as that. Uh-oh, how do we want to handle this? And you could be as angry as you want to be, right? But you just that's your phrase. Like you got to come up with something that could fit multiple situations. But if you do that, and then that's the phrase that you pull from, think about now you're not overreacting. You're allowing your kid to feel what is actually, happening. They already know that they did something that was incorrect. They don't need to be pummeled on top of that, and then you give them space to come up with how the problem needs to be solved. Well, maybe we should go get some towels and rags and yep, let's go ahead and do it. Let's clean this mess up together. I mean, think about that, how powerful that is to allow your kid to feel that experience, but not feel you feeling the experience.
Well, and I think sometimes as the parent too, we have the feel like we feel like we need to step in because we see our kid going down a path that's going to lead to a mistake. The mistake hasn't even happened yet, but we know inevitably because we've been in that situation, we know that mistake is going to happen. So we cut it off before they even get there. Then they never get an opportunity to live that out, to feel that mistake. And so I'm reminded of a story from Jordan Peterson. He tells the story that he was in high school, I think at the time, and he was mouthing off to a kid that was a bully, and they, sure enough, after the school was done, they were going to fight at this spot, and he was like, oh, well, okay, I guess. And he goes to the place, and the kid shows up, and all the kids are there, and he sees his mom walking across, and his mom looks at him. My mom fully knew what was going to happen, what was happening right then, and mom kept on walking. She let that happen because he needed to learn the lesson for whatever he did in that moment. He realizes he was in the wrong, that he shouldn't have allowed it get to that point. And he is happy that his mom allowed that to happen for him because of what it did for him. In that moment, yeah, man, he wishes that mom would have stepped in and stopped it all from happening. But if you think about that,
That would
the
have made it
next day,
worse.
well, the next day at school for him would have been really, really tough. And maybe
Yes.
even the next couple of years would have been really tough for him. But for him just to suck it up and do it because he said that's what was going to happen and he did it. Mom saw it. Mom, why didn't you stop me? Well, because I knew that you put yourself in that position. You need to learn from your mistakes. I knew that you were going to make it out of the other side. You were going to be fine. Now we're talking about it. Here's what we can do so that doesn't happen. And that moment, like, that had so much impact over him because now he's way later in life. He's way, way, way past school, especially high school. That is still a story that he tells, and that story hits with all kinds of different people. It doesn't matter if you're the kid in high school or if you're the parent that needs to hear that. Sometimes we need to allow our kids to feel out and live through those mistakes that they are building for themselves. Now, sometimes the mistakes are so big we do need to have some encouragement or some way to talk to them about what's going
Well,
on and hope to persuade them off of that path. But we can't do it for them and stopping in front of them and saying, nah, you're not doing this is really sometimes not the right way to handle that.
yeah, excluding immediate danger. I mean, I know
Ah,
that's not what you're talking about, but
right.
the kid's going to run out into the street. That's where you draw the line, or you mean those type of things, obviously. And it's funny because um, we I always developed the word for like so, especially for Keegan, our youngest. Um, I would say freeze. I wouldn't yell stop. So I remember the first couple of times he was running and he almost ran in the street, and I yelled freeze, and he froze rather than saying stop, because stop doesn't necessarily mean stop, although it does mean stop. We understand, but that doesn't mean freeze. And so just the slight verbiage difference for him, especially at that age, made a huge difference. Yeah, in that where now wait, like I yell freeze and then he froze and I say, hey, come here, and then he didn't go out in the street, and I go, look, you can't do this. Look at these cars that are coming by, like, what I mean, that type of thing.
Right. Yeah, and of course there is that line that needs to be drawn, and thank you for doing that. I, I think that I think parents themselves, so us adults, I think can learn from this confidence versus competence type of talk that we're having today as well, because I think adults often they have a sort of anxiety that comes from a lack of preparation. Like as adults, we want to be confident in conversations. We want to be confident in careers, parenting, health. We want to be confident in how we're leading our family. And we have to remember that confidence doesn't come from affirmations, although those can be helpful along the way. That's not going to make you confident, right? What it comes from is putting in the reps, the practice that builds the competence, and the competence is what builds the confidence. Confidence is the end result, but we need to put in the reps, and the affirmations can help along the way. And we have to go through the reps and we have to go through the failures. All of those things help to lead us to be confident. But we have to build our competence in order to stand on that, in order to be confident in the end.
Yeah, and I'm just going to go back to real quickly. Dan Sullivan's four C's is, you got to make a commitment. You got to have the courage to do it, which is obviously getting out there and doing it, whatever it is, in order to create that capability. And once you have the capability, then you have the confidence. But yeah, this isn't just a kid thing. This is an adult thing as well, because we all need to be continually learning and allowing ourselves to become better individuals. And really, like, tomorrow I'm going to be a different person based upon the information that I decided to learn today, and pivot and change or whatever. And we're every single day we are going to be different people as adults. It just all depends on the fact that, are we going to do it on by design, on purpose, or are we going to allow life in this world to sway those things? And I think the latter is the one that we don't want to be. We don't want to have life and the world dictate those things for us. We want to be in control um, to the best of our ability in making those things. So again, having that commitment, that courage, going forward, developing that capability so that you have the confidence.
Well, I think the deep truth. So let's reframe this. Let's say these are some key takeaways from our conversation here today. Confidence is not a personality trait, right? So if you thought like some people are just confident because that's how they were born, listen, confidence is not a personality trait. Confidence is the side effect of showing up, trying, trying hard, failing at things, being willing to be bad at something, staying long enough to improve. And staying long enough to improve is I'm always reminded of the miner, and we see it from the outside. The miner's going through the cave, and he's going and going. And he's like, "Oh man, I just can't go anymore." And like one more strike of the hatchet, one more of the pick, he would have struck gold or whatever the thing is on the other side. One more, but he stops just right there. So we have to be willing to be bad at something for long enough in order to improve. And we never know when that improvement is going to happen. And oftentimes we have to be bad and bad enough at something and or see no results for a length of time. And oftentimes this is what happens. We see no results, nothing, 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 nothing. And if we can stick it out for just long enough, boom, then all the results happen almost overnight, all at one time. And it's not that that actually is what happens, but it's because you put in the
Right.
reps of going through and being willing to be bad at it for so long, or doing it for nobody who's showing up, or whatever that thing is for you. But you have to be willing to do it for you, and be willing to do it for you, and find value in doing it for you. Then maybe you can make it to that next step that will be that big jump for you. And it's like all of a sudden you look back like, wow, I didn't even know I was standing this high up on the mountain. Look how far I've climbed. Because all you see is just that next step that's right there.
Well, it reminds me of, and I'm not going to go into the whole story because it is a lengthier story, but it reminds me of the bamboo farmer. So bamboo actually grows really deep before it grows up. So the bamboo farmer, he plants the bamboo and he's doing everything he needs to do on a daily basis, weekly basis, monthly basis, yearly basis, because it isn't until, whatever year it is, year 5 or whatever, that it actually starts to sprout up or whatever it is. I don't remember the exact thing, but the point of the story is that you saw nothing on top until the underneath was stable, and then it grew up, and then it grows in feet, like over and over and over again in feet. And that's the same thing for us. It's also, we've got to give that same grace to our kids.
Mm.
So just because we don't see what we're putting into them happen overnight, this is kind of like really the premise of the book that I'm writing, the 10,000 conversations, is just because you don't see that happen overnight, it's not one conversation that you have with your kid that all of a sudden changes them. It's the consistency, like you're talking about, over time. And how many times have we had parents, come back to us after the kid's been in the program for years and go, man, my child is X, Y, and Z now. Or they get a report from the school, and the school said that their child did X, Y, or Z, and then the parents amazed at my kid, like, holy cow, they, they finally came out of their shell. Like every kid blooms and blossoms at different times, and so I will say this: parents that are watching their kids out on the floor, it's not going to happen overnight. But also, don't look at other kids and think my kid doesn't do it as well as them. Your kid has nothing to do with that other child either, because they're all individuals and they're all going to blossom at different times. And they have, all of them have their own unique abilities as well. So be willing to be like that bamboo farmer and just keep on farming, knowing that the action will pay over time for yourself and also for your child.
Well, I think the other thing to remind ourselves too is that the confident people that we know are rarely the loudest. Like the really truly confident people, they're not the ones that are standing up and being loud all the time. You know that confidence when you see it. Those are the ones who survived enough challenges to trust in themselves. And that is the type of confidence that we're talking about. That is the type of confidence that we want to build into ourselves and into the students. And, hey, Mr. Runt, we're getting close to wrapping up here. Do you have any closing ideas or challenges maybe for the listeners this week?
Well, I guess what I would say is, pick an area that you want to develop more confidence in. So, and then ask, you know, what skill am I avoiding building maybe that I need to have? So pick that one area, focus on it, practice it, even when it doesn't feel good, practice it. And it's kind of like how we have developed our roadway to black belt is we know what we want the black belt to look like. And so we just chunk it backwards. So this is what the first belt before black belt looks like. This is what the second belt before black belt, all the way back down to white belt. So just chunking that down for yourself when you're trying to, come up with it. And then if you do come up with it and you go, yep, this is the skill that I want to develop more confidence in, or whatever it is, tell a trusted person. Don't tell everybody that you're working on it, but just tell a trusted person that this is what you're working on. Maybe you want a little accountability from them, meaning that you want them to ask you from time to time, hey, how is XYZ going? Just so that you have some accountability along the way.
Yes. And, hey, listeners, be sure to come back next week to find out how comfort might be costing you more than you think. Thanks for joining the TriStar podcast, where black belts begin at home. Connect with our community by visiting tristarkarate.com. Follow us on social media and share this episode with a family who's ready to grow stronger together. Until next time, stay focused, stay faithful, and keep training like a champion.